What? We're both naked. I'm talking about me and my dozer. I'm finally getting around to fixing that rotten exhaust pipe everybody's talking about, and that's why it's got no hood on it. I just got it off. It's a homemade exhaust manifold. Of course, it's upside down now. It used to go right there. This is a straight 6 International 750 cubic inch 1953 bulldozer. And all this thing is a pipe, sheet metal box, some homemade baffles, and 4 tubes that went to those 4 exhaust ports. Even though it's a 6-cylinder, it's got 4 exhaust ports for some reason. Everybody's also noticed that it doesn't seem to run right. I think it runs on 5 cylinders because a lot of liquid fuel comes out that back exhaust port. So I'm going to take the rocker cover off. Looks simple enough. Hopefully the gasket doesn't break. And then I'm going to adjust the valves. And then maybe that might give it compression. Who knows? Maybe it's just valve adjustment. I haven't touched this motor or done anything to it since 1995 when I got this old sucker. She just sits outside and she keeps purring along summer and winter, and I use it to plow my driveway. The hood comes off in 3 pieces. There's the intake manifold, and as you can see, it's got a carburetor and a lever that shuts off a butterfly so the carburetor doesn't function and it becomes a full diesel, and the air comes in there instead when you want to switch it from gas to diesel. Starts on gas, runs on diesel. There's the gas container. That's hydraulic oil to power the tilt cylinder, which is way down there. Then it has a large hydraulic oil tank in the front, which powers blade lifting and all that. Still got an old generator style charging system. Points of condenser ignition. There's that starter motor I put in and rebuilt on a snowy day. And there's 2 cartridge type oil filters and 2 cartridge type fuel filters. Being sitting outside for like 60 years, it's so amazing. All the bolts come out, no problems. Nothing broke, no heat required. I love working on big old American muscle. That's the way they built them. That thing's rustier, and it's a 2002. Now I do believe I can reuse the lower flanges. I'll just take a grinder and grind off all that rotten material there, so I have a nice surface to weld a thicker pipe than they welded before. Before, they actually just used real exhaust tubing, the kind that you would use like on a car. So see how thin it is? No wonder it didn't last too long. I'll use some actual thick pipe. I'll have to make a new box, and I'm not even going to bother putting baffles in. I don't care how loud it is out in the middle of 100 acres. Big old cast iron rocker cover with pretty much no gunge. And a pretty typical old-fashioned straight 6 head setup. Oh, maybe the head is 1 piece. It looked like it was 2 pieces. And an extra shaft. In an old video I talked about how this thing had 3 valves per cylinder. It just looks like it has 2, but it actually is a 3rd one, and the 3rd one goes to a lever you pull, which is this knob. And that opens the 3rd valve and decompresses it so it can start on gasoline. Release the lever and it switches back to 17:1 compression and runs on diesel. It's awesome. Sure starts good in the cold with never having to block heat it or anything. No ether I've ever used on it either. And the gasket's good. Well, now I've just got to put a battery back in it because I haven't used it all summer, and slowly rotate the engine until each one comes on TDC and adjust the valves. You can hear that? Well, I've just checked all the valve adjustments and they're actually all good. Has a lot more slack than your car would have, but it is a dozer. So, it doesn't burn oil. It doesn't even smoke like it's burning oil, so I doubt it's a piston problem. So maybe it's a faulty injector. Look at the size of that sucker. And it's just spraying fuel out instead of atomizing it. Or something wrong with the injector pump. It's not sending the proper pressure to the injector, but a lot of fuel does come out that exhaust when it's cold. Seems to fire up a little bit when the engine gets really hot and burns some of that liquid fuel. Also, I'll put the rocker cover back on. Even comes with handy dandy carrying handles on it. It is cast iron, you know. Wheel grinder. Been chopping off the stubs. And got 3 ground, well, 1 chopped off, 2 ground down. Use this grinder for that. And, well, there's one that I haven't ground down yet. That one's a bit warped. Gonna need a little bit more grinding and pounding. Then I'm just gonna weld some nice thick pipe on it. Sweet. Well, it's day 2 of this little project. I didn't spend more than an hour and a half on day 1. But there's the old manifold, the old stack, which I'm gonna reuse. So I'm cheap. Who needs to buy a new one? You don't have to. But I believe in building things with good quality, and this is made out of cheap, thin sheet metal. So that's why it's all collapsing and falling apart. Probably is 20 years old. So I bought myself a piece of structural tubing, exactly like that structural tubing that holds up my roof, 5" by 5" by 3/16. Some scrap metal I had laying around to make end plates. Of course, you've got to have end plates. So I got to weld those on now. Got some 1/8 inch thick pipe. Before they just use exhaust sheet metal. So I don't want it to be that skinny. You can sort of see it in there. I want my manifold to last at least the rest of my life. Of course, that fits perfectly inside there. I've got to cut out 3 holes in the bottom, 1 hole in the end. But I'll have to do that while I'm actually working on the dozer, so everything will be sort of tack welded while it's all sort of set in position. So we're guaranteed a perfect fit and square mounts on the flanges so we don't get an exhaust leakage. And even though that old beast was made in 1953, it wasn't hard to find exhaust manifold gaskets. Let's see how well they fit. Well, all I got to do is notch them like this homemade one that was already on there, so the holes line up, but the whole rest of them is just the right size for me. That ought to work. I wouldn't even bother trying to look for parts of that for that old thing. It'd take longer to look for them than it would to make them, so every time something breaks in that, which usually isn't much, I just make the parts. Well, the 4 flanges are all welded up to the vertical exhaust pipes. So now I've got to temporarily lightly bolt them into position. And then set that thing above them and mark where they're going to have to be cut through that pipe so I can have them fit. But they're going to fit through and stick through about 1.5 inches. And reason being is, when that stacks up there on top of the bulldozer blowing in the wind, the flapper on top sometimes is often blown wide open and rain is blowing in sideways. So water goes into that manifold and rusts it out, and I don't want it running down the cylinders. So if these things are sitting 1.5 inches raised and I've got a little bleed hole on both corners, we'll be all set for no water running down the cylinders and hydrolocking or seizing up my big 750 cubic inch American muscle motor. So out of the shop, up on top of the old beast, and I've mounted my tubes and bolted them down and set the big common rail or plenum on top and mark below with magic marker where I've got to cut the holes so the pipes can go through. This one's short because it can't come up straight, so it's got to have an elbow put on it so it clears this throttle mechanism, and then it attaches to the back of the manifold. That's why I haven't welded the plate on there yet. So now I'm going to unbolt those things, shove them in those holes after I cut them out, set everything back together on here. I'll have to bring the welder out with my portable generator and tack it all together so it's in position when it starts to get welded, so everything's in perfect alignment. And I've marked on the top part where I'm going to cut the hole out to put the vertical stack exhaust. So, got 4 holes cut in there now. Come on. There's the other ones. Save the end plate for last when I decide what kind of curve to make. Well, we got the portable diesel power on the go. Welder in place. Let me see if I can get this job done. The wind's died down. Yep, there's a thunderstorm coming, so I'm on a time limit. Well, unfortunately I didn't make it. The rain came too soon. Well, I've got one little cut to make in here for the back pipe, but I'll wait till things dry up a bit. Day 3. The rain has dried up, but it's coming back again today. So sure where we are. It's all partially welded into place, like well tacked. Reason being I can't finish it on the machine is it's hard to get around some of the spots to get a good weld unless I remove the manifold again. And number 2, today's quite windy, so it's making shitty tack welds by blowing away all the shielding gas. So I just put the intake manifold on to check that I have clearance, because it comes over this side and attaches to that air cleaner. So all's good. Got to finish welding around there too. I put the hood on and everything and checked that it came out the hole nice and centered, and that's perfect. So got a few tools to remove it, take it back into the shop and finish welding her up. It should be a masterpiece. Ready to weld. All done. Welded and looks like it's going to fit perfect with no leaks. Now I got to install it and try it out. Be the first time this thing was started since March of 2011, and now it's mid-September. So, old start, cold start. And I didn't forget the water drain hole. Cool. Okay, she's completely on for good. Air cleaner not installed. Ready to fire up on gas. Sorry I'm all out of diesel, so you'll just have to see it run on gas. We'll check for exhaust leaks, but I doubt I'll have any. So it's a gas diesel 1953 International TD20 dozer. You pull that knob to release the compression. Shut all the diesel fuel off. Pull the choke, push the start button, crank her and see if she fires up. Well, that's good enough for me. Looks quite successful. Seems like there might be no exhaust leaks. Sweet. Now to put the air cleaner back on. Hood's on and done. Well, I guess about a 5 beer job, maybe 6.